Greetings, everyone. Pete Bardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. It's Tuesday night. We're talking beat tonight. Otherwise, King Crimson, basically. King Crimson songs. We've got a special guest here. You know him very well on the channel. Mr. Martin Popoff is joining us. We've got Eric Porter, Ken Golden, and Chad Hutchinson. We're going to talk about Beat, the King Crimson show that's been touring around the country. And based on what the band said last night in Albany, New York, they are completely surprised at the kind of positive acclaim they've been getting from the fans, from critics and whatnot, sold out shows. And they basically said they're having the time of their lives. And I don't know, man. I get the impression this could go on and on and on. We'll see. I guess depends on what Danny Carey and Steve Vai's schedules are looking like. Well, the other two guys as well. But so we saw Albany, New York last night up at the Egg. Ken and Chad saw them in Philly, what, about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago?
Yep. Yep. 2 Sundays ago.
It
And
was the
Martin,
20th show.
yeah. And then in between, I guess, was Martin's show, right? Martin, yours was last week.
Yeah, October 18th. Today's
Yeah.
the 22nd. So, yeah,
Okay,
4 days ago. Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about our impression of the shows, the set list, what we thought about the performances, and all that sort of thing. So I guess Ken and Chad, why don't you kind of take us through what you guys experienced in the Philly show? I'm assuming we're looking at the same set list for all these shows, and maybe may differ from a song or two, but I think it's probably pretty close to the same. Actually, I'm looking at the set list from the other night, the night before ours in Albany, and already I see a different song in the set list. So I
Oh,
think,
really?
Yeah.
yeah,
Because I compared Rochester to the Philly show, and it was spot on.
spot on. Yeah. Like I see for the Rochester show, Lark's Tongues and Aspic. Oh, they did play that. That's right. Yeah, actually,
What's it?
yeah, it might be the same. That's right, because it's part three. Never mind.
Part
It
three.
makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, it's on
Yeah.
the album. Yeah.
What they didn't do, which the quartet did back in the day, was Lark's Tongue Part Two.
Right.
I wasn't looking at it correctly. That's what I thought this said. And I was like, oh, we didn't get that. Because I went over to Eric. I'm like, you think they're gonna play Larks, part two? And we were like, we'll see. And he's like, I think they're gonna play Red. And I'm like, all right, so which we got. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail the
I,
conversation
I,
So
I I guess
you'd think going to a show with Ken Golden that things would be nicely set up and you get a nice meal before a really good show. Well, let me just tell you that didn't happen.
there.
Okay. Yeah. We tried to go to this little brewery that Anthony went to, and it was jam-packed. They had two servers. They couldn't get us in. We stood there for what, 40 minutes?
something
And
like that.
finally said, screw it. Then when we ended up at a Primo's eating a half-ass hoagie at a picnic table on the street.
Sitting on a bench.
Yeah. Outside a florist.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of disappointing. So, but it was a nice night. Despite Chad being there, it was pretty good. He got a little handsy with me during the show, but
Well, that's because you like the seats so much. You're
yeah,
just paying me back.
that's the worst theater, the Keswick. But I gotta say, the sound was actually pretty good. Chad came through with good seats for us.
Okay.
So,
Was it? Did you have a sold out show?
We did.
yeah, it was. Yeah, and Philly is a King Crimson. It's a prog rock town. Genesis. You name the band. Renaissance, of
Renaissance,
course.
yeah.
Genesis. Whoever Crimson. They come into Philly. They would always sell out. So there was never any question about that. It was. I thought it was an amazing show. I mean, I don't know, Chad. You want to give your impression? I'll
Yeah,
give.
I'll tell you, I'm sitting there, I guess probably got about halfway through that first set, and you just realize you're watching four masters just at the top of their game. All four of them were fantastic. Vi did a hell of a job covering all of Fripp's parts, put his own flair on them, played them in different ways. He'd do some tapping and a lot more with the whammy bar. Belew, his voice sounded like, probably like it did when Ken saw him in 82, 83. Tony Levin was all over the place with the stick, even the synth bass, and just with his Three of a Perfect Pair bass, which was cool that he pulled back out. And Danny Carey was a monster. He put up the Rototoms up there and tried to give that Bruford sound from the 80s. They all did an amazing job. Um, Obviously things get twisted a little bit. They put a little different flair on things, which is great. You want to keep it fresh. But you didn't know who to watch, which is, a sign of that you're watching amazing musicians. I'm watching Tony Levin, but then I hear Steve Vai doing something wild over here. Now I got to watch over here. And who knows what Adrian's doing half the time, which is awesome. And then if you start watching Danny Carey, you can't take your eyes off him because he's all over the place. I love the fact that, Belew and Levin went back and pulled out some of their old gear for this. Steve Vai had some guitars specially made for it. The set list was great. I thought maybe it was a little teeny heavy on the Three of a Perfect Pair side. For the breakdown, we got 6 from Discipline, 5 from Beat, and 7 from Three of a Perfect Pair. I loved hearing some of these songs from Beat that I don't think I've heard before live. I've seen them 3 or 4 times starting in '95. So I didn't get a lot of these. Things like Sartori and Tangier, Neil and Jack and Me, they were just phenomenal to hear live. And for Adrian Belew in the beginning, I'll pass this off to you in a sec, Ken, but for him to walk out and everybody applauding for the 4 guys, and he just walks up and blows that whistle and they dive into Neurotica, that was just fucking fantastic. That was awesome. We knew we were in for a good show right then and there.
Oh, yeah. You guys surprised at how many? I mean, because this to me was mostly a night of deep cuts and cool improvs and things. I mean, I thought that was kind of awesome.
Yeah,
it's like
it was.
And me, this wasn't for the casual fan. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get the song Discipline. We got everything else from the album.
Yeah,
but I was surprised how much I liked the experimental side of Three of a Perfect Pair live. Like Dig Me was never my favorite song, but I loved it live. It was great. And Industry was, that thumping bass that just continues through. I think, too bad Luis isn't here, but I think it's an 18/8, which isn't easy.
Chad, wait. Luis might show up.
Well, we got another 40 minutes.
He thinks we're doing Italian Prog Part 4. So.
That's right. But yeah, there was that little section where they did a couple of the songs from the I guess the experimental side of Three of a Perfect Pair, and I was engaged by all of it. I thought it was great because they also played just about everything else I wanted to hear anyway. So yeah, the set list was incredible.
I thought that these guys honored the music. They put their own spin on it, but they were faithful to what it was.
100%.
I had the perspective of seeing them in '81 and '82 and '84. I saw them, I think, 3 times in '81 and once in '82 and once in '84. So I got to see this material. Model Man was one that they did in the first set, which they never did back then, I don't think. I don't remember doing it. But I thought was some things that I thought were interesting. Like Chad said, Adrian and Tony were great. I mean, it was like they'd been playing this material,
it's
for
like
years.
The 40 years never happened in between, right?
Right.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
the next tour or something like that. Danny Carey was fantastic. From my mind, a very different drummer than Bill Bruford. Bill is about speed and attack, and Danny Carey, to my ears, is more of a power drummer. But I mean, the guy's like an octopus. I mean, he's there's a technical side to him. I don't want to make it sound like he was inferior in any way. I mean, because he was a ridiculous talent. And,
well, play Tool material, you got to be pretty technical too.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I mean, the guy was phenomenal, but different. I think to my ears, a little different than Bill. And Vi was, I mean, I've seen Steve play so many times that I wouldn't say it was a revelation, but he was a revelation in the sense that he didn't he stood out because he's a monster, but he didn't. But he was so respectful of the music, and his technique is so different than Robert's. I mean, and actually, you develop even more of an appreciation for Robert because Robert's picking all that stuff. That Steve is tapping and he's using the whammy bar, and Robert's, I mean, with such precision, he's playing it with a pick. it really it's really quite phenomenal. But Steve really he he just absorbed it and he became it, and he was Steve, but he was respectful to what Robert did and what the band was doing. I thought that for me the highlight of the night was Sheltering Sky. Uh,
Mm,
I mean, that was Steve's signature piece. That
agreed.
was, back in the day, that was kind of like Robert's. Well, Robert had so many signature pieces, but Sheltering Sky was certainly one of them. Um, if I guess if I had any critique, I maybe I would have juggled the songs around a little bit more because the first set was very heavily skewed towards beat and three of a perfect pair, and I mean obviously my favorite of the three is Discipline. We had talked about that, and I saved it for the second set, and man, it was a blast. I mean, it was great because beat and three of a perfect pair have great tunes. I mean, I'm looking over the set list. Sartorius Tangier. That was incredible. There were so many high points, and there were no low points in the show. So
Hey, we even had the added bonus of Larry Fast and his wife sitting in front of us for the
yeah,
show.
Larry was saying.
Oh, we were saying, who'd we have? We had Pete Levin, right?
Pete Levin was there.
Tony's brother was there, and I think Jerry Murata or one of the Muratas was there.
Nice.
Cut just a couple rows in front of us. So
Yeah.
kind of neat.
Yeah, so it's cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was. If they came around again, I think I would go.
I wish I
Yeah.
could take a
And
month
we'd make
off.
and we'd make a reservation this time, Ken.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a weird little town. It's such a nice town, and there's like no place decent
It
to eat.
is.
That's
Well,
right.
I have high hopes for that stupid pub across the street. We'll see what happens there.
All right, let's
All
move
right,
over
high
to
hopes might be a
Toronto.
little too much. What's that, Pete? Sorry.
Let's move over to Toronto and hear Martin's take on the Toronto show.
All right, so I went with a buddy of mine, Augustin Garcia de Paredes, and his buddy Frank, and it was at Massey Hall, which is a venerable, super nice, opera house sort of theater venue, right? That's been renovated. It was closed down for about a year or something, so they renovated it. It's still merch and bar in the basement. The merch line was massive. I mean, they were just selling so much merch. It just went around the corner. By the time we got to the front, things were being gone. Augustin wanted Tony Levin's CD signed, and literally he had to take the sample one, like reach forward and grab it because they were all gone off the wall and everywhere else, and most of the shirts were gone. So yeah, they were selling so much stuff.
Was that a sold out show, Martin?
Yes, I would say so. I don't know officially, but yeah, it looked absolutely packed. That place fits about, I think it's considered to be around 2,200 in there. Yeah. King Crimson's played there before. I saw them there with John Paul Jones backing up. So yeah, they like that place. It's kind of a prestigious, nice venue. Apparently it's fairly expensive for bands to play there because it's all union and stuff like that. But
Ken, that's like Beacon Theater size, right? Isn't the Beacon about 2,500 or so?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
New York
thing,
City,
yeah.
Whereas like the Keswick, I think Chad holds about 1,300, 1,500.
1,300, yeah.
Yeah, a little smaller.
Yeah,
so
we
I went through the list and just at setlist.com, I just trusted them basically. But I mean, they said the Toronto show. So I'll tell you what I don't think. I don't think there was Sheltering Sky unless it was squeezed in somewhere and I kind of missed it into the instrumental stuff because it's like that, right? But yeah, no Discipline, right? Beat, no. So two with vocals from Beat not played, Two Hands. Nice ballad, right? And the Howler with the cool, heavy, galumphing dinosaur kind of beat with vocals, right? And then Requiem instrumental, and then Three of a Perfect Pair, just two instrumentals, Nuages and No Warning were not played. But I'm not even sure. I mean, they might have been in the long instrumental passages and they might have referenced them. I'm not sure, but it says they weren't played. Funny thing happened. They actually had a flub during Neurotica. They started Neurotica, right? And of course, we know Adrian was piped in for his fast vocals there. And yeah, they lost their place for a second in that. But then they recovered the sound. Frank's a drummer in Augustin's band. And And we both noticed that Danny didn't sound very good for the first couple of songs. The cymbals were muddy, didn't like the snare sound, but like most concerts, it got better and louder as it went on, right? They do those adjustments and things got better, and then it was really good. I thought the only part where I thought they kind of failed a little bit was like my favorite song of all of this stuff is Three of a Perfect Pair, and I was nervous that they were not going to get to it, but so it was really late, but it didn't groove the way I wanted it to. I just love that groove when the bass is up high in there, and they're going through that chorus, but they somehow, I noticed this when Foghat did I Just Want to Make Love to You. It's supposed to be a high point, but they got to it this one time. I saw them quite a few years ago, and it was just kind of trapsy drumming. It wasn't a powerhouse, right? And this didn't groove the way I wanted it to, right? And then no trash cymbal, no broken cymbal for Red, right? You didn't get that sound in Red. But no, I loved it. They played basically everything except the instrumentals, like I say, a couple vocal things. Now I love what Ken said about Steve. That was absolutely perfect, because I couldn't keep my eyes off of Steve. I was most impressed with Steve of everybody. Let's go through everybody else first. So Danny, totally agree with you as well. He had a lot of drums, and he was very busy, and he played a lot of cool sounds, and he had samples and great, electronic drum sounds and everything. That was great. Tony looked totally young. He looked like a totally young Tony Levin. He's doing great. Doing backup vocals, which was cool, right? And as Chad said, the synth bass, all kinds of stuff there. Adrian was his just absolutely cool self. Pete, I've said this many times. I think Adrian Belew is my favorite rock and roller of all time. I just love the guy, right? I rank 1967 as like the second best song in the world after Bohemian Rhapsody. And I always pair those together because it's an acoustic Bohemian Rhapsody, right? But he was singing amazing. Absolutely right. Singing great. Kind of dressed the usual schlubby Adrian, like just not, very nondescript, right? But yeah, so I would watch him sometimes for his guitar stuff, but I'd almost like it would be a default thing where I'd go look at him, because I was just trying to discern who was doing what for a moment, right? Between him and Steve. But I got to tell you, Steve Vai, I was most worried about him for this whole thing, right? Because I'm not a big Steve Vai fan in Alcatraz and David Lee Roth and Whitesnake, and I'm not a huge fan of long stretches of his solo stuff, although I love quite a bit of it. I love Flexible, I love Sex and Religion, right? But I just love the way, first of all, that whole thing with the big baggy red suit and stuff, that looked amazing, right? That looked just so cool and so edgy, right? And then the stuff he had later was so Steve Vai philosophy, when he stripped down a little, right? And he looked like half between the red suit and half between his David Lee Roth costume almost, right? So he looked amazing the whole time. But what I loved about him so much was that you didn't get any of the Steve Vai thing that annoys me, like the super high burbly notes, but that was literally the best, well thought out, most intellectual version of a guy sitting down and obviously planning to say, I have a huge personality and I want that personality in here, but I also want to have all of this Robert Fripp amazingness in here. So, can you use the word respectful? I almost think it was even more respectful than playing Fripp's parts. It was like, I'm going to respect him even more and show Robert Steve Vai playing your parts and injecting 24% of Steve Vai into everything you do, and then being 75% Steve Vai some of the time, right?
At least 1%.
Yeah, well, no, I meant splitting those out, actually, right? And just saying like 75% of the time, I'm gonna play things that sound a lot like Steve Vai, but like Steve Vai not mixed with Robert Fripp at all. And then just randomly, I think when he was doing Fripp, it felt like, pick a percentage. There was this great tribute to Robert Fripp, but but it was, and oh man, all the synth guitar, all that stuff was amazing. The whammy bar, his moves, he just looked like he was just bathing himself in this music and just loved this music, right? And just he looked like he was like just in awe at being here doing this and being able to contribute so much and be such an artist doing this and not be just a cover band guy. Like
you got that from some of those interviews before the tour too.
Oh yeah,
you kind of got the feeling that he was going to do what he did. Now you never know what's going to happen until he gets up on stage, but yeah, it sounded like he was really immersing himself, and it was going to be a big challenge. And he loves Robert Fripp and this material, so I was really happy the way he
but yeah, I mean, Tony, Tony just did Tony, and he did these songs. Maybe it's a little bit more technology than the old days. Adrian absolutely did Adrian. Like you say, Danny did power drumming mixed with what he's supposed to do. But Steve was just so creative that I told some people, like, I've never been more entertained by just watching guitarists at a concert in a long time. And so it was him and Adrian, but literally, I'm even a hack drummer, and I wasn't even really following the drums very much. I was just like back and forth between Adrian and Steve the whole time. And like 80% of the time I was just watching Steve, because he just has such a spirit and mystique to him, right? He just looked like a Swami up there. He was just so cool. So anyways, that's my review.
Yeah, I think a lot of us kind of experienced the same thing.
I have a question, because Pete and Eric, I guess you would pick up on this. I noticed at one point in the second set, Steve was playing a guitar. It was not an Ibanez. He was playing, it looked like a Strat body.
Oh, that's right.
With like a Telecaster neck or something like that.
I was trying to pick up on that, Ken, and I could not see what the neck was, but it was almost like it looked like a black Strat with a white pick guard. I couldn't see the headstock, so I couldn't pick up what he was playing.
It almost sounded like it was a 12 string at some point.
Yeah, it was exactly. Because it was
I don't even know what song that was for.
Mari Kudasai, I think.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
okay.
It was late in the set, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said Swami struck me as a Swami, but he also looked like a snake charmer, and he looked like the snake at the same time.
I was going to go
so cool.
20s gangster with a little MC Hammer in there with the pants. So,
well, in Philly, we got a black suit. We didn't get the red pimp
oh,
suit.
really? Okay.
The vest, yeah. He looked a little bit more like he looked a little bit more like his character in Crossroads.
Yeah. And then the second set,
he had the hat, and he had the red suspenders, and yeah, it was quite bizarre. It was quite bizarre, but it looked great. I'm gonna turn it over to Eric in a second, but and it's funny. Eric and I have seen a whole number of shows together leading up to last night, and I don't think, Eric, if you even noticed this, but we almost had no dialogue to each other during the entire show.
There was not a lot of talking.
No, absolutely. Normally we're like, oh, did you see that? How about that? Whatever. Nothing. I think it was only in the Sheltering Sky after Steve's solo that we kind of looked at each other like, Jesus Christ, But other than that, we didn't say anything.
Yeah, because there wasn't much, Pete, and I think it was right what you were talking about before. Because when they came back out, I was like, I think they're playing Red, and you were talking about Larks. That was about it for conversation, except for the little intermission.
Let me just add also that this is like a perfect King Crimson set for me, because if you ask me, to put together a set, it would be all these three albums. These are my three favorite albums. I don't need to hear anything old. I don't need to hear anything after it. But to hear, almost every single song off of these albums, including all the vocals ones except two, is absolutely the perfect set for me. So.
Yeah, I could have traded Discipline for Red. I didn't need to hear Red with this lineup. I'd have taken Discipline.
I dug it. I was psyched with it.
I love it. Don't get me wrong. But for what they were doing, I'd have loved to hear Discipline instead.
Well, Chad, it's a good point, because that makes them a cover band, right? Like, I also wanted to make the point that, I think Adrian is way more important in the band than Robert is, because he's the vocalist, he's the lyricist, he's the leader, he's the front man, he's as much of a guitarist. So to me, he's like 40% of the band, and then you've also got Tony in there, so you've got more than half the band, to me, is there. So to me, it's there's no way it's a cover band at all. It's part way to being Heaven and Hell, Black Sabbath, right? But that's even more legitimate. But to me, this is basically that band, and like I say, Adrian Belew to me is by far the most important member.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, because like after watching last night, I only want to hear these guys play that era's material. Just
You're right.
like when I saw the last incarnation of Crimson, I didn't really want to hear them play any of this stuff because I think that band was there to play the old 70s, late 60s or in
The
70s.
one song they did was what, Indiscipline,
Yeah.
and
Oh
it
yeah.
wasn't so great. They rearranged it and they
It's almost like you need Adrian for that, for this stuff, right? It's
Yeah.
not the same without him.
Yeah. To Martin's point, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric, but I thought the set list was great. The performances were amazing. We had really good sound in Albany, as always. There were a couple of flubs.
Yep.
There was one thing when I forget what song it was. Tony was doing some weird stuff on the stick, and he hit like something bum. It was like, oh, ouch! But for the most part, and you would expect it with arrangements like this, but maybe one or two, that was it. But for the most
Sorry,
part,
let me add one more quick thing. Adrian did a lot of his Phil Lynott slow phrasing or going over the bar phrasing. So we were looking at each other thinking, okay, we just heard a flub where they lost their place. That's the kind of flub it was. And then Adrian seemed to be really threatening to cause them to lose their place because he was doing that, coming in late on the vocal or going over the end of the bar on the vocal. So he was like adding a wrench into this lattice work that you have to do with these songs, Neil and Jack and me, all of that stuff back and forth, right? And so I thought that was pretty funny. It's like, because sometimes when they were doing that lattice work type stuff, they were looking at each other a few times going, are we losing our place? Because Tony was often sounding kind of like a guitar. So he was very busy on the bass. So he was not holding the bottom end very much when they were doing that stuff. Right. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was funny. It's like we're gonna white knuckle our way through this. We're gonna make it even more challenging by Adrian being, I don't know when he's gonna start singing or stop singing. Right.
The only noticeable things I think from our show, Adrian had two technical issues at the beginning of songs, but he blew them off, all good humor, started right back up. I mean, it actually was quite funny. He really took it well. But
having all this perspective of listening to all this progressive music over the years, and it was interesting to just sort of sit and watch these guys, and the intricacy of the music just comes through. The interplay between these four guys and four guys, yeah, four guys, and just the complexity of what they're doing, and you just sit and it's just amazing how difficult what they're playing is, and they kind of make it look, I don't want to say effortless because clearly it's not, but in a way it was a little almost effortless for them, and it's just not. It's just there's so much going on in this music.
I don't know if anybody watched Tony Levin's interview with Rick Beato, but he was talking about the earlier tours, the 80s tours, where he would have to play two different time signatures on the stick, trying to keep up with Bill Bruford doing something else with the other hand, and then sing with Adrian at the same time.
Yeah, it's like, and they do it, they nail it, and they just nail it.
Yep.
I thought, you talk about this whole thing about effortless. I was watching Vi a lot last night. And for a guy who's, fairly new to playing all this stuff, he made a lot of this look so effortlessly, but he just looked like he was having the time of his life, and he was just oozing coolness. And at one point he was laying through a blistering solo and he broke a string. Did you catch that, Eric? I haven't seen a guitar player break a string live in a long time. And he just went through the whole solo as if nothing happened. And then as soon as it was his turn to turn it over, he just looked side stage and handed it and got another one. That was it. It was no drama, no nothing. And Adrian is using the power drill and doing all this weird stuff, and you expected like disaster at any juncture, and it really never happened. Never happened. Yeah. Cool. Eric, your impression, you haven't said enough tonight. So
well, we love that venue. It was listed as sold out. We saw a few empty seats, but maybe people can't show, something like that. You guys have made such great points, and same thing. I was focusing on Steve, but I think the 2 points, they just all looked like they were having a blast. Belew was smiles from ear to ear. He was great with the audience. But I think, and this isn't meant disrespectful, I watched that whole show. Like Pete said, we barely looked at each other. I mean, we were just front focused.
Were you
But
at least holding hands?
well, a little bit. Uh, but I think, and again, like I said, I don't mean this disrespectfully. I watched that whole show. I walked out of there. I did not miss Robert Fripp or Bill Bruford. They they were just, I never thought about them through the whole show. And that's not, like I said, it's not meant to be disrespectful, but they just killed it. And you know, everything you guys said, I watched Vi. I loved when him and Adrian would kind of, you could tell they were kind of grooving off each other and playing off each other. But same thing, I thought Steve was just spectacular. I mean, he looked like he was having a ball. I think Pete, we did kind of, with his pulling the whammy bar up and he's got the guitar up in the air. I mean, he was just having a blast. But
Yeah, that's cool.
I think that's a testament. You've all said, we know they're great musicians. You got to think the time they spent working on this, getting this tour together. But I don't know. I got such a vibe from that band that they were just having a ball. I got to hear Neil Jack and Me. That's probably my favorite tune from the three, and that came right out of the gate. But I like the way it built, Ken. I understand what you're saying about shuffling the songs, but I felt that second set just built. And then when Pete and I did talk, we were talking about, he's like, oh, they didn't play Thela and Genji. And I'm like, well, maybe we'll get that. And they did Red. And I thought everything just went up. That second set right to the end, just everything just kept elevating. I, I have nothing but great things to say. You have to expect a few things here or there. I do remember something, Pete. I think one of the ends of the songs came off a little odd, like Carey. Then, because I saw Steve kind of look and they were chuckling. And I can't remember what song it was, but no complaints about the set list. I loved the interaction. And then they were doing a lot of stuff with the crowd where they were putting the light out on the crowd, and that seemed to be giving Adrian a thrill. We had a couple dancers down front towards the end, and I think Belew was getting charged from that. But he's a great front man too. He interacted with everybody. He's turning around, looking at Carey, him and Levin, him and Vi. I thought there was great chemistry with that band. I don't expect that they would do anything other than tour, but that music just sounds, it'd be nice to get perspective from someone, maybe bringing somebody who's not a King Crimson fan, but that music does not sound dated at all to me. Unbelievable. And Pete, I know, I want to give you some time. So, but
Eric, who's making music like that these days? No one.
no
Who
one,
ever made music like that?
There's no reason for it to sound dated.
it's
That was such a bizarre formula. No one ever copied it, right?
true.
Yeah, that's why when we did the review of those albums a few weeks ago, to me I said that Discipline was the most important prog rock album of the '80s. I mean, it was completely genre. It redefined the genre for me because nothing like it. There was nothing like it before and after. What could you think of other than themselves with Beat and Three of a Perfect Pair? What else came along after that was like it? Nothing,
No.
So
Certainly ignored all the trends in the neo prog area and all things like that.
yeah, I mean, but that's
Absolutely.
prog rock kept developing, I guess, or it did its thing. But that King Crimson, that version of King Crimson was so specific.
I mean, Peter Gabriel's Security was pretty important too, but he already blew the doors off with the third album, right?
Martin, I'm with you about Security. That's a masterpiece. That's his best album, and I could talk about that album all night long. But
Yeah, don't get him started, Martin.
Yeah.
yeah. I'd love to do an album study for that.
We may do that at some point. Don't let me forget about it. Yeah, I think one of the cool things for me is that I didn't feel like I was seeing a cover band at all. I know it's called Beat, but to me, I was like, okay, this is the now version of King Crimson. We know Fripp is done, right? Is it possible, remotely possible, that he could give Adrian his approval to say, hey, if you want to carry on as King Crimson, go ahead, just give me my cut, right? I don't know.
Good idea, yeah.
That won't happen.
No?
I don't think so either.
You think this is a one and done thing?
He certainly blessed this. Who knows what else this might morph into?
Yeah.
I
Certainly,
mean, they could get such a charge out of playing with each other. Maybe they would do something together. I mean,
but it
it's
wouldn't be the same.
no.
I mean, the writing of him couldn't be the same without Fripp.
Yeah, Robert is probably 75% of it when it comes to the writing.
Mm-hmm.
So
I got the impression based on what Adrian was saying last night that, like I said, I don't think they expected that this would be this well received. So what that means, I don't know. Whether it just means they'll just, hey, maybe they'll continue on with the tour or do it again in the not too distant future. Because I mean, we know how busy Vi is. Once Tool comes back around, Danny Carey's off to do that. But yeah, I don't know. But like Ken mentioned, if they come back around again, would you go see it again?
Yep.
I would consider seeing it again.
yeah, why not?
Maybe they could throw a couple other surprises into the set list. I don't know. I mean, they played pretty much everything, but I was worried early on. It was just weird. I was just, because you're seeing the audience surrounding us, and I think there was about 800 people there last night,
Yeah,
Eric?
I think it's like 800, 900.
Yeah, something like that. And yeah, you look at the general age of the people who were there, much older than me, and I'm no spring chicken. And I was just like, I'm
I
looking
disagree with that about Toronto. It was all guys, but we looked around and said there's a lot of 35, 40, 45-year-old guys here.
Was there? Yeah, we didn't see a lot of that last night. But
There was
I
a
mean,
young
full
couple in
crowd.
front of us, had to be in their 20s.
Yeah,
Wow.
there were
Yeah.
not too many. There were not too many hostages at the Philly show.
Mm-mm.
It was a sausage fest.
Yeah, there were some women.
Well, yeah, same thing there, but in Toronto. But yeah, a lot guys of all ages, basically. I thought,
Yeah, it was mostly older up in Albany, but after like a few songs in, I was kind of like looking around and I'm like, and based on what they were playing, I'm like, I wonder how deep they're going to go in this set is because, I'm so used to like going to see these legacy bands and seeing these crowds of people who just want to hear hits and they're just indifferent to everything else. And they got like a standing ovation after like every single song pretty much, which I thought was cool. So I wasn't worried after like the fifth song, I wasn't worried anymore. It's like, they could play anything from these albums and I think the crowd's going to be into it. So because I honestly, Eric, I didn't get the impression that people went any more nuts for Elephant Talk or Mate Kudasai than they did for The Sheltering Sky or any of the other deeper cuts. It seemed like it was all received pretty much equally.
No, I agree with you. It's especially as they got into that second set, like you said, it was almost like after every song, people were up, and which I think the band got a kick out of.
Well, it's like
The
they played their greatest hits, Eric.
They did. They did. Well, didn't Belew throw a couple of those out there, like Heartbeat or whatever. Not Heartbeat. What?
So we're gonna play all our MTV hits.
Yeah, all our
Oh,
MTV.
yeah.
That's right.
The atmosphere was so different than like the last Crimson tours. Like when you went to see the big version of Crimson doing the whole catalog, it was like almost going to like a classical
Mhm.
Yeah, this was fun. This was like
This
a
was
rock
fun.
concert.
This
That
was-
was like a serious thing. No photographs, no put your cell phones away, no talking, all that sort of thing. But even you
They
see
came out-
This
Yeah,
was
matching suits and all that. Yeah.
this was joyous. This was like a celebration
Yeah.
of this music, and and you could see they were having a good time. It's very rare that you ever see King Crimson having a good time. So
Well, Robert doesn't allow that. You gotta.
no, the only time I may have mentioned this back in 1982 at Stony Brook, it was like the next to last date or one of the last dates of the entire tour, and it was almost like they were drunk on stage. And Adrian was cracking up. He was doing Art Carney honeymooners imitations on stage. They were making fun of one another. They were having even Robert was laughing.
Wow.
It was the only time ever. I mean, that's King Crimson is serious stuff, man. You don't take that. You don't take that shit lightly.
Yeah.
So so that's serious medicine.
Yep.
which is why it's so weird to see Robert doing those videos with Toya, and it's and
Oh
like,
my God.
the real Robert.
Right.
Come on, that's not the Robert we all know and love.
Right, right. Pete, did you notice? Because Martin was mentioning the merch, and I know you went over there. Did you know? Was there a lot of people at the merch tables?
There was when I walked over it, I was waiting for it to thin out a little bit because when I first got there, it was like a ton of people over there. They had a couple different shirts. I didn't really look too deep. I just kind of
Okay.
glanced over. I saw the one shirt with the elephant on the front and all the tour dates on the
The
back.
elephant logo is awesome.
Did you
It
see
It is
the
a cool logo.
Did you see the Steve Vai album for $100?
No, no.
Oh,
I think
did you guys see the fully signed drum skins? One for $1,100 and one for like 800 or something, 750. And oh yeah, they had that. And Adrian's album was signed, Tony's album was signed. But yeah, Toronto they must have had, that line was always 100 people long before the show, and all the merch was gone before the show started. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, when we walked in, when the people working there were telling us about the set time and all that, and they're like, "Oh, and there's a lot of good merch. Make sure you get over to the merch table." I wonder if they were told to say that because the merch was going so quickly from show to show. So I don't know, but yeah, the elephant logo thing is incredible, really.
That's a
good.
very cool
I just
logo.
couldn't do a $43 T-shirt or whatever it was.
Yeah. You notice we all have our merch on tonight, right?
By the way, I got my Isobar shirt. Thank you so much, guys, on Isobar.
I thought that's what that was. That's
I
cool.
thought, yeah, I was going to say something.
Just arrived yesterday. I was like, "Woo, look at that!" One of only 8 made. So if you're looking to get one, I can't.
Wow.
You got to contact the band. I don't know. That's the note they sent me. They're like, "One of only 8." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Thanks for thinking of me. Thank you, guys." So there you have it, everybody. Our take on the three King Crimson shows: Philly, Toronto, and New York. If you've seen any of these shows, let us know your impression, your feedback, your opinions on the concerts you've seen. And if you haven't gone yet and you have an opportunity to, go ahead and check them out.
Yeah,
Because I think you'll really enjoy this. So I want to thank Martin for jumping on. I knew Martin went to the show while I was on vacation last week. I saw him posting something about the Toronto show, and I'm like, I got to remember to ask Martin if he wants to come on and talk about it, because we could always use the extra person to talk about the extra show, So, but yeah, we got thumbs up all around from all of us on beat. And we'll see you next time here on In the Prog Seat. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Album War next episode. Once again, stay tuned for another handful of albums going at it. For Eric, for Martin, for Ken, and for Chad, I'm Pete. Thanks for watching us In the Prog Seat. See you next time. Bye-bye.